Hi, my name is Max, and today I'd like to talk to you about some quantum mechanics. Now, quantum mechanics is a weird study field, there's no other way to say it. But today I want to talk about perhaps one of my favorite subtopics, and one of the weirdest ones I've ever heard by far. It's an offshoot of the many worlds theory, or it's an interpretation of it called quantum suicide. And that name is both confusing, intriguing, and a little distressing to most people. And in fairness, the concept is just those three to most. So what is quantum suicide? Before I start explaining this, I should note that it's a decently complex topic, so if you don't have a decent understanding of the many worlds interpretation already, or the many worlds theory, I suggest you look into that a little before watching this, because otherwise it'll make very little or no sense. So, quantum suicide. When you talk about many worlds, most people traditionally will use a pretty easy example, like flipping a coin, heads or tails, where you only get two scenarios. But the problem is, most things in life have more than two outcomes. In reality, if I flip a coin, it could land on its side as well. That's unlikely, but it's possible. Now, pick absolutely anything, and you've got infinite many worlds. One of those things that is never 100% is death. So let's say we've got a stick figure. And he's happy. We'll call him Bob. Now Bob's happy, but his luck's about to turn. A robber comes out of nowhere and stabs him. Poor Bob. Now, when the robber stabs him, the most likely outcome is no more Bob. Sorry, Bob. But, there's always a chance he pulls through, and he's still Bob. He's good. So, even though we've now got a very likely scenario where there's no more Bob, we still got one where there is Bob. And even though it's unlikely, it's still possible. So we're going to follow Bob's timeline for a little bit. If we go with the universe where he dies, his timeline ends right there. Let's say he lives, and it goes on. Well, Bob is in the hospital now, and he's getting treated for his stabbing wounds. He could either have a doctor who is very good and will save him, and Bob is Bob, all happy. Or he could have a doctor who is not very good and accidentally make it worse. And that's the end of Bob. Okay, so now we have three scenarios for Bob that he could have ended up in. He could have survived the stabbing and survived the aftermath. He could have survived the stabbing but died in the aftermath. Or he could have just died in the stabbing. Though it's increasingly negative, 2/3 say he died, there's still a chance he lives. So where we're up here, we get 1/2, 1/3, and now I'm exaggerating this, but I'm only using this to prove a point. In reality, I'm sure there's multiple ways this could pan out that I'm not even thinking of. Okay, so let's say Bob gets discharged from the hospital. Now, very likely he goes home and he's okay, Bob. But there's a small chance he gets hit by a car while he's outside, or something terrible happens, and there's no more Bob. All right, boom. Now there are 4 scenarios. 3 where he's dead, 1 where he's not. Now, let's say Bob makes it out of the hospital, gets hit by the car, and survives somehow. So he's all good, but he's hit by a car. Bob's probably pretty sad right now. Now let's take this to the extreme. Bob gets shot. And I'm sorry for the escalation there. Very likely, no more Bob. Small chance though, there's Bob. 1/5 chance he's alive, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 timelines, and only 1 has Bob in it. So, what is the point of me following this treacherous line of Bob and giving him perhaps the worst luck of any human alive? Well, quantum suicide basically says that using many worlds interpretation, until there is a complete 100% chance that something kills you, there is at least one version of you in those infinite many timelines that probably thinks they're immortal because they've survived so much stuff. Like this Bob, for example. Now this Bob, he passed away right away. So for all intents and purposes, he's just a regular guy. This Bob survived a stabbing, so he's happy. This Bob survived a stabbing and got better. This Bob survived a stabbing and didn't. This Bob survived a stabbing, got better, and was fine. This one wasn't. Got better, wasn't fine. This Bob made it through all this one didn't. Notice how many more there weren't made it through. Only one makes it through. As quantum suicide progresses, it becomes increasingly unlikely that any given version of a person will be the surviving one. But because there's very little things that can absolutely guarantee death, there's nothing to say that this Bob won't go on forever, to the limits that forever can be, realistically, and just somehow evade death. So that's quantum suicide. I think it's one of the most interesting topics. It's definitely a bit of a downer, but if you're willing to open your mind to many worlds, I think it's one of the more interesting interpretations because it shows one of many directions you can go with this thought idea. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much.